Hey, it's Kathy Aubert, Center for Transformation and Change. This is some tips on designing, facilitating workshops on equity inclusion. First off, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Ame Lambert, who on my radio show today gave me a great idea of working with whites. The work that she did with senior leaders at a university was having them talk about your ancestors. So when did they experience prejudice, discrimination, and oppression? She was talking more about ethnicity and nationality, which is critical if you're doing white accountability spaces in general. If you're looking at privilege, you may just want to have full breadth of differences. Knowing that folks with multiple privileges are going to be in resistance usually, so asking this question could really engage them in the conversation. When do you know, or what do you know about any of your ancestors? Prejudice, discrimination, oppression. And then tune into, especially around ethnicity, nationality, possibly religion, when did these groups experience oppression, and then how did they become white? So Italians, Irish, I think folks from England and Germany were always considered white. Could be wrong about that. So I thought that was a phenomenal way to engage the resistance. We know that's going to happen with whites afraid of being called racist, and to have them explore and look at the systemic dynamics and oppression, power plus privilege equals oppression in their own family history, could be powerful. And this weekend I watched Dr. Heather McGhee, McGhee. A white friend of mine sent me her TED Talk, and I was listening to the Chris Hayes podcast, which I believe, Why Is This Happening? It was just out last week. Dr. Heather McGhee, phenomenal African-American woman leader. Particularly her race-class narrative is so critical in these times. And understanding the pandemic and what we need to do. And I think it's a powerful way to situate as we're working with whites who are in resistance and saying, yeah, but I grew up poor. Yeah, but I currently am living without much economic security, to also be able to help whites see what's in it for them to address racism, dismantle racism, and how racism really hurts whites of low income backgrounds historically and current. Heather McGhee, phenomenal. I also think it's a good time as we're into seventh, eighth week for many of working from home and essential workers, expendable workers. That self-care and community care are critical. So whether it's using my book, it's the last one listed there, In It for the Long Haul, which on my website is free. You can download, and there's resources for handouts to lead conversations. So I just worked with one organization. The entire university had a chance to read my book. And then I did a live Zoom with them where I just kind of, how are you and what's going on? And then what are your questions? And how do you do community care and self-care in a pandemic? So you could do the exact same thing. Just go to my website, drkathyaubert.com. You can find access to all three of my books, actually. Then, while you're doing that, what if you do some live Zooms? Just did some work doing some more live with folks, foundational equity inclusion workshops on microaggressions. Yes, all this is important to be doing. How do you do with an inclusion lens? And professional development for the folks in your organization. Microaggressions might be what they have energy and bandwidth for to recognize over Zoom in our virtual meetings, on our work websites. How are we still unconsciously, unintentionally perpetuating microaggressions, and especially focusing in on folks who identify as Asian American, Pacific Islander, or are race to be? What are the hateful microaggressions and systemic oppression they're experiencing in this pandemic, which might be similar to historic dynamics, but particularly now your friends, your family. That might get people's hearts open, and anytime you can have people talk about real microaggressions that are happening as we're doing Zoom meetings, and why we need to have greater inclusion and equity, and our brilliance of all ideas, and not some people's voices heard more than others and some interrupted more than others. Doing a live webinar this Wednesday, May 6th, on creating inclusion partners. It's an infrastructure that can really help build the capacity of leaders and teams, entire departments, And so if you're interested in that, again, on my website, you just go to Dr. Kathy Obear /events, EVENTS. You find free access to my resources, links to community connections, and to the 2 May webinars I have coming up. And actually, that's the second one. How do you create inclusion, use an inclusion lens in these times of pandemic? I'm Kathy Obear from Center for Transformation and Change, and each week, once or twice, I will be doing diversity, equity, inclusion tips. If you find you really want to use this time to take a course with me to develop your capacity to design and facilitate really powerful social justice, equity, inclusion workshops, you can check that out on my website as well. Take care as we move into week 7, 8, or 9, or what this is. People, I think, are going to need much more self-care, community care, as so many are violating stay-at-home orders and putting us all at risk. So, meet people where they are. Lots of emotions, lots of grief, anger, fear. Thank you for your work of healing and equity inclusion in the world. Take care.